What's going on, everybody? It's Matt, Lumberjack After Dark. This is a late session, but super excited to do it because we have Beth Traverso, who you might recognize from some of my live streams and some of the amazing comments that she leaves on my videos. Yes, if you're this good, you actually get to have an interview with me and I get to say, now I really need to talk to you. So Beth Traverso, thanks so much for joining us this evening. Super awesome to have you.
Thank you, Lumberjack After Dark. I'm loving this. This is so great. I'm West Coast, so it's early, but you're late, East Coast late, but
it's almost
hey, it's such an honor to be on here. I've enjoyed what you and the three amigos have been doing for all this time, and I appreciate you guys. So
awesome.
It's super fun to be on here. Thank you.
I'm super excited to have you. So the main reason that I have you on, aside from the great comments that you leave on the channel, is you're one of the unique, you're one of the few. I always compare, in Wall Street, all these guys that are constantly working in Wall Street every single day, they have their own portfolios. So they trade for their customers, trade for their companies, but then they also have their own portfolios that they're, constantly looking at as well, and supposedly not doing anything nefarious. But that being said, what's really interesting is that you're one of the few agents that actually not only is a great real estate agent crushing the numbers, but you're also an investor. And so what I really wanted to spend the time today, and I think where a lot of the viewers could gain some value, I know that you're based in just outside Seattle, and I know that you've been absolutely crushing it there for years. But what I wanted to talk about today was really the gap that a lot of new investors or even newer investors have when actually engaging an agent. Because this is one of the things, as you know, you've seen my content. I hate 95% of agents. I think they're completely useless. They can't fog a mirror, and they literally picked this because they were sold on the idea that being a real estate agent is part-time, which is beyond silly, especially if you're a winner, especially if you are a producer. So talk to me a little bit about, just kind of generally speaking, kind of what it's like to be that investor and that broker, and kind of what that looks like on just kind of the day-to-day basis. And then we'll kind of jump into more of the stuff that, that we talked about where it's, I'm a newer or newbie investor and what are the things I should be looking for.
Right. So I was fortunate that way back when I started back in 1998, like between 1998 and 2000, I was just getting my feet under me and learning the tricks of the trade and getting the skill set, doing the work, because like you said, like a lot of agents out there don't do very much and don't have the experience. The vast majority don't. But those that really do excel at learning their craft and getting better and better at it, and build a business, like they will do well and they will make money. It's kind of a fallacy. Like a lot of people see these shows on HGTV and think you get your license and you're going to be like driving Bentleys and splashing cash. And it's like, that's not very smart financially for one thing, but you can get caught up in the show, but there's a lot of savvy, business people out there in real estate too, and on the sales side. And so thankfully I was able to meet up with some of those early in my career. I had a business partner at the time who was a real estate investor, and I met him and we teamed up and we're selling houses together. And he'd go up to the Bering Sea in Alaska every summer, whatever that season was for the crabbing. He'd make a ton of money and come back and buy a house. And like every year he was doing that, and he was meeting all these super smart people. And I was like, whoa. And I learned, I was watching like, wait, you can do that, and then you get that, and then like, is that legal? It's legal. Oh my gosh, wow. So it's like I can do this as somebody who like,
this isn't
I didn't have a college degree. I wasn't like anybody special or whatever, but just kind of seeing that example, I realized that that's something that I can do too. And I want everybody to know that, like, it doesn't matter who you are. I did not come from money. In fact, quite the opposite. Came from like basically nothing. Had to, claw for every little bit, and that helps. It gives you grit, and, you need that in this business. But I think, somebody told me, way back when, like the way to make money or create wealth in real estate is not by selling it, it's by owning it. And, I didn't start big. I still don't consider myself big time, even though, it depends on who you're comparing yourself to, what that looks like, but I have a good portfolio and financially free and all those things. But, it's just the matter of just like getting my foot in the door and just like getting some properties and just hanging on, if you do just that, that's I just want people to know that they can do it. So yeah.
This isn't the part where you tell me that you also crab in crabbing season, then you come back and you buy a house too. Like you left that part out, right?
Yeah, I didn't do that.
Okay.
You won't see me on the Discovery Channel or whatever, but
Yeah,
but those guys do park their boats at the Fisherman's Terminal in Seattle, and you get to
they
see some of
do.
those guys.
Yeah, they
Anyway,
do for sure.
so no, but I basically, sometimes we do get these windfalls or whatever. That first year that I was, had a good year, my friend and mentor, if you will, he was like, hey, don't spend $1 until you go buy a house. Like, buy a house, then do these other things that you're talking about,
Yeah,
and thankfully I took his advice and I did. I bought a house,
that's
made every
awesome.
mistake I could have possibly made, but you know what, I made a lot of money and learned a lot of valuable things, and it just kind of got it going, and you lose your fear.
That's awesome. So I think that the first step is, YouTube didn't really exist back then. And so there
None
weren't
of it.
essentially all of
Yeah.
these, online mentors and online people sharing their stories, sharing their experiences. And that's what people in our position really had to kind of go through, was trying to hunt and find those people where it was just like, listen, you want real estate? Would you please just talk to me for 30 minutes?
Yeah.
And now there's this absolute dearth of knowledge out there. The only downside is that some of it's complete garbage. Obviously none
Yeah,
of the
sometimes if
stuff
there's
that
too much, people
Amigos
don't know
does.
what to do if they feel overwhelmed, so that's why I
Yeah.
think it's good to just like narrow in. Like, if you feel somebody shares your vision, my advice would be like, don't go looking at, you don't need to watch like 20 YouTube channels. Find a couple that really resonate for you,
Mhm. I agree with
and
that.
maybe go a little deeper on those.
Yeah,
My
I totally agree. And so kind of that next question that I had for you is, we talk a lot about the new investor. We talk a lot about the people that might be sitting on the sidelines and saying, I'm timing the market. And hey, maybe you're better than I am, and maybe you can time the market, but a lot of people have died trying to time the market. So I think that the best deal is always the great deal that you get based on where you're at, and does it give you that above average return?
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I want you to talk a little bit about is, as that investor and agent, what are those things that people should be doing in reviewing the agent that they're going to work with? Because for any of you that are familiar with the story from last week, that agent not only cost me a deal, but she cost herself a little bit of reputation in the space. But
Right.
worse than that is, she cost her buyer significant dollars, and this is his big exit, right? This is his walk into the sunset. So what would a new or newer buyer, what kind of advice would you give them as they're doing that search for, this is the kind of broker, these are the kind of questions that you need to be asking of your broker to make sure that you're going to battle with the right person?
Right. Great question. And it might take a little bit of searching to find it. I wouldn't just go with any random person. Oh, my friend's sister is an agent or anything like that. Like, you need somebody who's going to really um have the experience to guide you. I think it would be good to find an agent who is an investor themselves. And some people worry about, like, well, those agent investors may not, they're going to buy all the deals, but trust me, like, there's never anybody who's buying all the deals. Like, you can't, buy all, not everybody's buying all the time. And if I have a client interested in a property, I always defer to them. And, if they want it, it's theirs. If they don't want it and I like it, I'll take it. But it's really very rarely is there something where, like, what I'm looking for in my buy box, as we say, is
Sure.
not going to be what theirs is.
Sure.
People are in all different places and different investment styles. And so I find that there's very rarely any conflict. And so I wouldn't worry about that as a aspiring investor or somebody just getting started with investing. Um, I would say that going, same places you go to learn, to maybe meet other investors, like meetups might be a good place to meet agents who speak that language and understand it. And if you get to know agents that in your area that and see who they're working with, I mean, really the best thing is a personal recommendation from somebody who has a great experience with someone that they really like and trust. And you got to make sure they're active too, like research how active they are, because the average agent doesn't do very much.
Yes.
And you got to be somebody who really is in it, boots on the ground, in the thick of it every single day. Because I'm telling you, when these opportunities pop up, they kind of fly under the radar, and it's like, boop, there. And when you've been searching enough, you as an investor can spot it, but also, like, if you have an agent who's like, oh wait, that's a good one, or that one
Mhm.
might be a fit. for the lumberjack or whoever, you know, it's like,
Exactly.
get to know it. And they want, once they know what you're looking for, they can spot it and tell you about it. And then also be able to, you want somebody who knows enough to be able to go, oh, well, that one, you know, there's always sort of stuff behind whatever it shows on Zillow, for example. Like there's going to be a backstory, and you want somebody who can spot that and go like, oh, well, that one's in the floodplain, or, you know, that's a high crime area, or whatever it is. Like, you know, that one is in, you know, the busy road is a factor, or it's close to the landfill or something, you know, whatever might, these little things that you may not be aware of, you know.
Yes. So I
Yeah,
think that I think that speaks really well to, you know, what we talk a lot about, which is, you know, for me, when I'm breaking into a market, I'm actually looking up MLS, I'm looking at kind of my buy box, and I'm seeing who sold a lot of that in my buy box.
yeah,
Because you can actually track what your buy box is, and then you can kind of go backwards 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, and say, what stuff sold in my buy box, and then who sold it. Because I think one of the things is, and one of the things that's actually part of one of my strategies is, when I don't recognize the name, because I've been doing business in my towns for, you know, 15, 16, 18 years, when I don't recognize the name, I know that they don't do very much business, and certainly not in that asset. And so if they don't do a lot of business in that asset, I know that there's a very high chance that they're going to misprice it. And
right.
that's a lot of times where I've created value. So as that newbie investor, I think one of the things that I see as a challenge that continues for new investors is that they kind of show up, they believe that they've done the work because they have the credit score, they might have a pre-approval, they've got some down payment money. Let's say they've done all three of those things. I find still very often that they're showing up and saying, okay, agent, I'm here, show me the good stuff,
Yeah,
show me the really good deals when I'm going to get a great return on my money, as politely as you can. What would be the response to somebody in that position? Because I'm sure I'm sure that's people that come to you all the time. Hey, I've got money, I've got great credit, and I've got a pre-approval. Now let's go find me, you know, let's go find me a deal. Walk me through a little bit how that average newbie or sort of newbie can really kind of elevate themselves in your eyes to get more of your time and more of your kind of mind share on something.
right. So I would say they need to, if they're expecting me to do the work for them because they don't want to do the work, learning their market and their buy box, I can't do that for them.
Mhm.
Like there's not enough hours in the day. And the agents that are really good, their time is really valuable. So you need to know, you need to tell them, because what I think might be what you're looking for might not be at all what you're looking for.
Right.
Different investors have very different goals depending on where they are in life, what their goal, what their objective is, where they are in their investment career,
Mhm.
you know,
Sure.
very different things. And so I say the more educated a person can be, the better. And I understand they need guidance and patience, and that is always something that I'm happy to give.
Mhm.
But if somebody's like, I'm looking somewhere in Western Washington and I want a good deal, it's like, well, that's too vague, you know? So, and you're just gonna get swept under the rug a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So, but basically you need to basically show that you're willing to put in the time and the hard work, you know, and go out there. And one things I would say to people, anyone looking to get to know market, is like, just go out there and look at every single property for sale in your area, you know, for a few months. Just get out there and look at everything.
Mhm.
So now I know with multifamily, sometimes you can't just go over there and tour it, you know, but
Those
you
are a
can
little bit
drive over
tough.
there and
Yeah.
you look at it
Sure.
and study the numbers. Anybody can do that. You can talk to agents who are selling them.
Yep.
You know, even if you're not going to work with that person, you can call the agent on the sign if you want. Now you don't have to use, I don't recommend you use that person. You need your own agent to represent you, but you can learn about it.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, I think so. I think, you know, one of the areas that I think really agents do a very good job, or the good agents that do a very good job, are the ones that can tell you, avoid this neighborhood because they might know something about that neighborhood, right? They might know, hey, that builder that built those 25 years ago was sued 7 times, is out of business, and you're going to have nothing but problems with those houses. Or things like, there was a super fund site. Like, I went and I looked at a property and they basically said, yeah, like a mile down the road, there's actually a super fund site. And I was like, we're going to pass because I don't want my tenants to be glowing and then charge me with them glowing. The other thing too is things like, schools. And a lot of people don't understand that, cheap can be the road to ruin because they're
Oh
like,
yeah.
oh, this place is awesome. Like we have 3 or 4 streets in each of the cities I do business with. You need to recognize that anything trading on those streets is going to be trading at a 20% reduction in discount because it is a zone that 3 squad cars show up for any call.
Yeah, there's a reason, and I will stay away from any, especially as I've evolved over the years. Like now, I like only buy in the areas that are really good areas. So, because like if you buy the ones that are really inexpensive, I've heard you guys say like you can go broke buying cheap, and it's so true. People
Yeah.
learn that a lot of times, especially new people. That is like, oh, they're so fixed on only the numbers, which the numbers are really important. You can never ignore the numbers, but you got to look at the whole picture.
Yeah, for
And a
sure.
good agent will tell you, if an agent's not going to tell you truthfully what they think about something, that's not who you want to work with. Like people need to know they can trust their agent. You got to like, trust, and respect that agent,
Sure.
or they need to like, trust, and respect you,
Yeah.
and for it to really work.
I'm always looking for B and C quality product in A and B areas.
Yeah, especially if you can see like where the development is happening. I like to buy starter homes in areas that have been like upzoned and like where it's like the low rung of that neighborhood, but it's growing and you can add value. That's kind of my niche that I like to
Yeah,
do.
I think that that's, and what I know being in my market is that, I talked to Mike and he has, $330,000 ranches that have a $900 a year tax bill. And a $330,000 ranch where I'm from is a $6,000 tax bill
Yeah.
because we don't do income tax, we don't do sales tax. All of it's really kind of property tax based. That's us, that's Florida, that's Texas. Those markets are kind of aligned when it comes to property taxes being really crazy high and the valuations being pretty close.
Right.
And so the single family home strategy doesn't work in all markets. Duplex, tri, quad doesn't work in all markets because a lot of times there's that type of asset isn't really available. That's much
That's
more
true.
available
Yeah.
kind of in like the
Mhm.
Pennsylvania Northeast areas
Right.
because it's old.
Yeah.
The average age of the building that I buy is like 100. It's 100 years old. That's the average age. I consider it new construction if it's something was built in the 50s.
Right. You got early Romex wiring in those ones. And yeah, I mean, I know I love
Yeah.
old houses. I love them.
Yeah,
But they do require, that would require an agent who knows to speak that language, and they know
sure.
how to, if I've attended hundreds of inspections to the point where I can look at things and go like, that's asbestos wrapped around that heating duct, you got to be aware of that. This is knob and tube wiring. Your insurance is going to make you replace that within a few months of purchasing it. And it's going to be pricey. The lath and plaster is harder to work with than sheetrock, all those types of things, and if your agent doesn't know that stuff, then it depends on where you are. Like if you're in an area where it's all newer construction, none of that matters, then it might be more about newer recalled materials or whatever. But like you know,
polypropylene.
yeah, or like there's a stuff called LP siding that was like
Yeah.
sawdust siding, but I've learned like I can point out the knot, like that knot is the recalled LP, so if you want an agent who can like point that stuff out.
Yeah.
So
For those investors that don't know literally the amount of knowledge that Beth just dropped on you guys, color me impressed because I can tell you that very, very few brokers even could even know what knob and tube is. They might think it's a
why it
door.
matters.
Yeah, they might. So, and the funny thing is, we look at it and it's like knob and tube matters because there's a lot of insurance companies that won't insure you if you have knob and tube. There's a lot of companies that will look at it and say, okay, if you're going to do this, this is not going to fly FHA because that polypropylene has actually got a lawsuit and that fund is all gone. And you're going to have to replace that stuff because the likelihood of a flood is very high. Things like Pacific, Union or Pacific Breakers
or whatever. That's another one. And then here's another one for people. Like if you see a little candy cane pipe sticking out of the ground next to the house foundation, that means there's an oil tank. And if it's no longer being used, then it needs to be decommissioned. It could be leaking.
Yeah,
Don't dig it up, decommission it.
Exactly. And it could have leaked. And it could have leaked. And if it did leak, like I've actually had friends go through the process of having to have those tanks excavated. And then you have to pay to have the dirty dirt brought to a specific site. And let me tell you, it's not cheap.
Yeah, what we do is we
Unbelievably
decommission them
expensive.
in place just for that reason, to try to avoid all that if possible. But yeah, it's a thing, you know, anyhow, you
Sure.
know, in our area, you know, Seattle area, you know, anything built prior to 1960
Mhm.
probably had an oil tank at some point, you know, so you just kind of learn to look for the signs. There's a few signs, but that's just something that, you know, just experience and time and just like
Sure.
observing. I've done a lot of rehabs,
Yep.
maybe not as many as you, but I've done a lot. And then, you know, you learn from all that stuff,
Do.
you know, and
Do.
just, and you know what, if you're an agent, just going to inspections and just watching. If you're a buyer buying, you know, when your inspector's there at the house, follow them around a little bit and just ask what they're looking at. You know, you'll learn.
So one of the things, I'd love to get your opinion on this. So one of the things that I always recommend to students that I'm working with or friends that I'm helping out with a project is when you select your home inspector, that it should not be somebody that went to the class. It needs to be somebody that actually has a background in construction. Actually somebody that has done far more than the class and has 20 or 25 years experience. I loathe that you can get your certificate to do home inspections in like 7 to 10 days. I hate that. I think it's the worst because I've been the victim of, I was in a pinch. My other guy had broken a leg or something like that. And I asked another agent and I said, who do you have? He's like, yeah, you can use this guy. He's great. You know, he's been doing this for, you know, like 10 years. And he was a 10-day course guy. And he literally failed everything in the report and said, fix or replace. And the bank denied the loan. And I had to go to another bank because his report was so bad. And so what would you do in a scenario like that? I mean, is the advice that I would give to people saying, hey, when you're looking for that inspector, find one that's got track record, find one that's got probably at least a couple decades in the business. And and hopefully has a background in construction, because they actually know what it takes to fix something. It's not just, well, I saw this and I'm pretty sure that's a crack. No, it's not. It's where the bladder meets the seam in the boiler, you dummy.
Yeah. So, and you don't want somebody, you want somebody who's going to be educated and informative and not an alarmist either. Like you want to know all the facts, but you don't want somebody who's going to be like so scared of saying something wrong that they just make everything sound like it's a disaster.
Right.
There's a way you can say the same facts without, you know, one might sink the deal and one might just be something you can learn from and make an informed decision. You know, you don't want an inspector who's going to gloss over things. Never, never, never. But and I'm curious, like maybe with commercial lending, like how did the lender see the inspection report? Because we never share that.
So in where we are, that inspection report was actually shouldn't have been fashioned to the bank, but it was.
Okay, because that's
We
one
have-
of those that would just
we had no idea how they got a hold of it, and we're just like, what do you mean? What is this?
because that would kill any deal, any underwriter looking at any inspection report.
Because
It's
underwriters have
it's
this much
for
risk
the-
in their blood.
Yeah, they will not, they will ask for literally everything on that report to be fixed.
Right.
And
Exactly.
really it's more up to the buyer's discretion to decide what they're willing to accept. And the appraiser might call out a few things, but the appraiser is not the same as an inspector. Don't ever rely on an appraiser to do an inspection. They're not going to do a structural inspection.
Guys, this is a really important point that Beth brings up, which is some appraisers that have been around for a while fashion themselves inspectors, and they'll start pointing things out and they're like, oh well this, and oh well this, and you need an agent like a Beth to jump in at that point. What would you do in that point, Beth, if you start seeing that appraisers start to be taking liberties, as I call them?
Well, it's kind of a tricky thing, you know, because we don't have much control over what they're going to put in that report.
Sure.
You know, what I can do is I can just try to maybe, I like to be there if possible, and kind of, especially if you feel like it's going to be a maybe a little bit of a sticky one, you know. So another thing to be aware of, guys, so if you're looking at a house, it's a fixer and it needs to get financing, be aware that it needs to have basic habitability, like
Yes.
in place. Like if somebody ripped the flooring out, it needs flooring. Somebody took the kitchen cabinets out, it's going to need kitchen cabinets. Like it has to be basically functional. It can be ugly, it can be, all that stuff, but it's got to
Ugly,
be
dated, all those
there.
things.
So when you're looking at things and you got to get a loan, it's like, oh, we just used to deal with bank-owned homes a lot, where the bank's like, we're not doing anything. I don't care what it means. We're not replacing that carpet that we tore out. There's probably not to go in on this video, but there's things you can do to like work around that, but like part of that's also just like, I like to be there if I feel like, especially if the older, maybe run down, deferred maintenance property, like you want to be there to kind of see what they're pointing out so you can get ahead of it. And it's funny, like some things kind of run in trends too. Like a few years ago, there was a thing where they were calling out railings on everything. And I don't know if somebody decided, oh, that's more of an 18-inch drop. So, my husband's a contractor, which helps too. He and I have been doing these rehabs and investing forever, so like he and his crew can just run out there and throw up a railing around the deck, in a day, but normal, it's hard to have those kind of resources a lot of the time. Yeah. But that's another thing. Like if you have an agent that has, they might not be, married to somebody who's a contractor, but you got to have people that are in your network, and especially I'm constantly project managing all my listings before they go on the market, and just like, okay, this is happening here. These guys here. Oh, wait, we got this problem, plumber over there. And you got these people that you have nurtured this relationship with them where they will walk through fire for you. Like they're going to do and I can like have them come to the rescue and help my clients. It's like then everybody is a winner, Yeah. So if you can find somebody who has those kind of resources, so if the appraiser does say like, well, this railing needs to be put up, somebody can put it up, or, we're a VA and, this paint is flaking. That's a big one. Flaking paint, especially in your area where it's way before 1978, we're talking 1878 or whatever's going to be lead in that paint,
There is.
And so you see it flaking, somebody's going to have to get ahead of that. I think a good agent listing agent will take care of that before it ever hits the market, but
yes. And so for us, when you see red barns, the reason why barns were so red, were almost always red, ox blood was used to paint them. That's
seriously?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So that's why a lot of the pretty picturesque things, it's just ox blood.
Just blood.
But what's really interesting is, so to that point, that you bring up something really interesting, which is the lead issue, right? That gets more and more tight around the country. I understand people's hesitancies and wanting to test for lead, but often here in this market, if you want to test for it, your offer is immediately denied. No one ever wants to have to confirm that there's lead, because then they have to notify everybody.
Then you have to disclose it that you're selling, you have knowledge and reports of lead-based paint. Correct. I always tell people, if you're buying a house before 1978, just assume that it has it.
Agreed.
It's there. If you're buying a house from 1878, it's there somewhere, and you just have to. It doesn't mean you can't buy the house. It just means read the pamphlet. Like your agent by law has to give you this pamphlet about how to live with lead paint and make it safe. Yep. And there's certain things that are going to be, more dangerous, like flaky paint or like old wood double hung windows where you go up and down and like that powder falls and that little kid licks their hands and ingests it. Address that kind of thing. If it's on a wall, like under 10, 10 might be excessive, but maybe not on some of these older properties, but like if it's under several coats of paint that are latex and it's just on the wall under there, it's probably not ever going to get out into, it doesn't just travel in the air, it has to be like worn down or somehow peel off.
Yes.
Yep. And then you don't want to be like growing tomatoes right next to the house, put them in a raised bed.
Sure.
Like there's things you can do to make it more safe. Just educate yourself. I've maybe only had in 20 plus years, maybe 2 people conduct a risk assessment for lead. And in both cases, it was just fine. They just wanted to do it to reassure themselves. Okay, it was allowed. Yeah. But if you're competing, that won't be allowed. It's just not going to be. Just
even in the 08, 9, and 10 market, you still couldn't. They still would be like, no, the house is older than 78. It's got lead. We believe it may, right? Because there's that part of the PNS which says unknown. I mean, there's a lot of things on there that are unknown. And once you test and then you can no longer say unknown. And then it's something that you have to report.
It takes a non-issue and turns it into an issue. And that's what I tell to the
Absolutely.
buyers too. Like once you as a buyer have that, then when you go to sell in the future, you have to provide
If
that
you didn't
knowledge
abate it,
and
sure.
disclose that knowledge in
Yeah.
reports.
One of the things that's really interesting is I've actually gone through a lead order and they have a special gun that they use on the paint and it goes 31 mils deep and a layer of paint is 1 mil. So it's 31 layers of paint. And the likelihood that you painted every single year since 1978 is probably zero. So they're going to find the lead. And when they do, the other issue that we had too was we had people move in kids that they had to take the kids from their kids, they were their grandkids. They moved in and these kids were in these awful places, these slums that were just falling apart. And we know that's where they tested positive from because we had no quote unquote hazards, but because it existed, we still had to abate. And
And so is
that
that
was massive.
encapsulating it, or because I think I did that once where it was encapsulated, or how do you, I mean,
So I never ever encapsulate based on our state rules. Our state rules, when you encapsulate, you open yourself up for an annual inspection.
oh, okay. So that's
And
something I
so,
haven't had to deal with.
yeah, so if you have an annual inspection based on encapsulation, what we always do is we pay to remediate, which is guys go in there, we rip windows, we rip doors, we rip everything. I mean, most properties now, like replacement windows have been around long enough that that's usually not a thing. So it's almost always, if it's like one of these older houses that has the doors that are still existing,
Yeah.
because that's still a strike point. You can even see it, like the rest of the door is painted, 50 times, but the edge of that has chips and broken pieces off and things like that.
Right.
So for us, we don't even bother with it. Like before we put anybody in there, we want it to be safe. And so we'll just go through it and say, you
Yeah.
know what, this is a sunk cost, but we all sleep better at night knowing that.
Yeah, I gotta make it safe. If you see hazards, they need to be addressed always. That's always
Absolutely.
gonna be just follow that rule always. If it's my advice to people.
Safe, better be
Mhm.
safe than sorry, for
Yeah.
sure, in my eyes.
Mhm.
So we've basically established for those new homeowners or new home investors that are looking to invest, A, don't depend on your agent to do all the work. B, make sure that you have an agent that's actually, shine and showed and true and has the experience. They're then going to have the connections to get things addressed for you and probably help bring along the right type of inspector to get that deal done. And then kind of lastly is having that conversation about once you start seeing some of those reports, being able to decipher them for you of this is a big deal or this isn't a big deal. Also help you make mistakes from a location, a locale, which is, listen, I get that you want to buy this. I get that the numbers look great on paper, but you're going to need to buy an annually new Kevlar vest if you want to go collect your rent there on an annualized basis or on a monthly basis. So I think those are some of the core criteria. Any other thoughts that you would give to that new or newer investor to say, this is kind of the last piece of advice I would give you to make sure that, you really got some value out of what we're talking about?
Yeah. So I would say, just like we always say, just get out there and make some offers.
Yeah.
People get, some agents, they hear, I want to be an investor, and they just kind of tune out a little bit because they've heard that a lot. And maybe somebody just never spins their wheels forever and never buys anything.
Mhm.
So, with their guidance and, make educated offers, but get out there and make some offers. And then if you find somebody who really shines and is great, we are a referral based business. And if you are able to tell other people, whether they're investors or not, hey, so and so is great, I really recommend you use them, that's going to go a long way too.
Yeah,
So,
for sure. No, I think that's great advice. I think, like I said, I think the other piece that's really super important for that newer investor is it's not on your agent to do all the work for you. They're the ones along with you. They're the ones that are creating those, I would say, those avenues for you to get the different things that you're going to encounter addressed in a timely fashion. I think that's
yeah. And one other thing I
huge.
want to mention too is the other
Yeah.
role the agent has is to know how to negotiate the deal and get it
Oh,
closed. Like that's really the part, to negotiate the deal and get it closed.
yes. Yes.
So and that's true, whether you're an investor or not, like you need somebody who knows how to make it all happen. And it's somebody who has to know how to work with a lot of different personality types, because we see all kinds of personalities out there on the other side of the table. And we're like the filter, and we don't necessarily know what's, that other person on the other side, anything could be going on there. And like our job is to like cut through the noise and like find the path forward, so you want somebody who's going to have really good people skills on with that, has to be a good listener, has to be very intuitive. I think having a high EQ goes a long way. So in real estate,
I think so. My wife says to me often, she says, you have a very high EQ. You just don't choose to use it often enough.
Well, sounds like you got a great agent that they could be like the filter,
They're fantastic. He's literally so after we worked together for about a year and a half, he said, I really would like it if you would get your license. And then when you want to do more, like just really, come on my team. And I was like, that's not a good idea. Because I just have no tolerance for some of the things that I run into. I say, listen, I pay you because I need a buffer. I need a buffer because and I always tell him, like when he calls me, I say, I'm not cursing at you. I'm cursing about the situation.
Yeah.
And so he laughs because
and you want your agent can't be out there cursing and doing all like you
exactly.
did. The agent be the calm voice of reason in the middle of all the storm.
He is as cool as the other side.
Yeah, you gotta be. That's a good agent that can do that, because if somebody gets your agent's feathers ruffled, then it's just downhill from there.
Well, it's really great too, because there were a couple of issues that we had in deals, and he even said, he goes, hey, listen, you know what? He's like, in something we were selling, he goes, I probably could have done a better job there. So I'm happy to cover cost on that. And I was just like, absolutely not. Like the fact that he was willing to do it, I was just blown away. I was like, absolutely not. Like, client forever. He just did the right thing. But they're not perfect. And everyone has to recognize that agents aren't perfect. But guess what? Buyers are the worst. We are so not perfect. And you can't get emotionally tied up to it. I still get a charge even when I buy a property. It's funny. That's something that Dion and I talk about still. And I said, I still get pumped up. Like when I put an offer in, I still want to know. I'm still kind of impatient, even though I know that the offer expires in 24 hours. That's what we almost always put for a time. So I'm still calling my agent the next morning and saying anything from him, like anything. So he knows to kind of keep me up to date. But Beth, I really appreciate you taking the time with all of us today. It's super awesome to meet an agent that knows what knob and tube is. and actually can help
put that on a t-shirt.
Honest to God, like I literally had an agent walk me through a property, and she goes, steam heat, now that's the most efficient heat you can get. I was like, oh sweet Lord. I was like, I need to get away right now, because it's not even close. But just thank you so much. Thank you for all that you do for those new investors.
It's my pleasure. Anytime. This was a lot of fun.
It was awesome. So guys, leave some comments down there. If there are questions, Beth, I know will answer them. She definitely takes a look at the questions that we put in there.
Will do.
Yeah, she definitely does that. So, and if you're give them more exact area where you are. That way, if people are shopping, they can contact a great agent.
Yeah, so just east of Seattle. So like within commuting distance of Seattle, Bellevue, so basically just like I'm 30 minutes to the east of Seattle. I work, Seattle Metro and also the more like rural suburb areas.
So if you need a great agent and you're in that area, do yourself a favor, reach out to Beth. If she can't help you, I know she'll pass you on to somebody that can. Absolutely fantastic. Beth, thank you again so much for your time. And if anybody wants to contact you, what's the best way they can get in contact with you?
Yeah, so I would say probably the best way would be bethtraverso.com, my website. You can just reach out to me there. My info is all over the place. If you just Google my name, all sorts of stuff will pop up.
It's true. You're a top agent. You are all over the place.
It's another way to check an agent. If you Google their name and nothing shows up, that's a red flag. So whenever I'm vetting an agent in another area, I'm always looking up their reviews and their profile. That's another tip for people. I'll leave with that tip. But basically, I know on Facebook too. I'm pretty active in the real estate groups on there, or just in general on Facebook. You can find me, just my name, Beth Traverso, just like it says in the little corner there, just like it's said, just like it's spelled. So
it's awesome. Beth, thank you so much again for the time. Guys, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Absolutely give Beth some questions, because I think we all can learn. And I think especially those newer and newbie investors, you got to be getting ready because correction's coming. I won't call it a crash, but correction's coming. And you got to get your ducks in a row now, because I
Yeah.
promise you, Beth's phone is ringing with other
Yes.
investors that are
This
getting
is
ready.
your time to shine, people. We've been waiting for this.
Yes,
So let's go get them.
it's
Yeah.
such a nice change from the last few years.
I
for
welcome
sure.
it. It's so refreshing. So
It is.
yes.
Beth, thank you again so much for the time. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, guys.